So before this video begins, I have kind of a big announcement, and I would really appreciate it if you would just give me 2 minutes to hear me out. It is kind of important. For those of you who don't know me, hi, my name is LechGang. I make video analyses on shows like Total Drama, Disventure Camp, and BFDI, and I would really like to keep doing that because it's a lot of fun. Unfortunately, my father, who is the sole breadwinner in my family, is struggling to find work, and that is bad for everyone who lives in my house. So my family could really use some money, and you all could use some videos about the shows you love, and fortunately, I have a way to help with both of these problems. I have a Ko-Fi now. I get a lot of requests to cover various topics ranging from series that I actually know about to projects that I have never heard of in my life. So if you've ever wanted me to make a specific analysis video, then this is your golden opportunity. To give you a quick overview, I have 3 types of videos available: short analyses, basic analyses, and lengthy analyses. Short analyses will be about 2 to 3 minutes long, enough to fit into the YouTube Shorts format, and will cost about $12. I'll still do my due diligence to make sure the video is well written and well researched, but I won't have to take several days just to script and edit it. Basic analysis videos will be about 10 to 30 minutes long, and they'll go for about $50. Essentially, a longer, more detailed version of the short analysis. You can request character analyses, small season reviews, any topic really, within reason of course. These take a bit longer to make given all the scripting and editing that I need to do, but just like the previous option, I'll make sure that the video is up to the standards of every other video on this channel. And lastly, the lengthy analysis videos. These are videos that are longer than 40 minutes and will go for $90. Any video this long is going to require a lot of effort on my part, both in scripting and in editing. So if your topic is really broad or detailed, like a season retrospective for example, and you want me to be really meticulous with my analysis, then this is the tier for stuff like that. If you don't have the money, please don't feel pressured into buying anything. You can still support the channel for free by subscribing and hyping videos, which I know a lot of YouTubers tend to say, but I don't know what to tell you. It really does help. I've never done any sort of commission work before, so I ask that you all have a little bit of patience with me as I find my groove, but I promise I will do my best. The link to my Ko-Fi will be in the pinned comment below, and there will be more information there. Thank you so much for listening to this announcement. Now, to the video. Sometimes when things are old and outdated, you need to remake them into something better. This is what Odd Nation Cartoons decided to do with Disventure Camp Season 2, and it's what I'm going to do with my Season 2 rankings video. I mean, just try to process what this video was. I sound terrible, my audio mixing is terrible, I still use the fucking Lechway head. This is an old video. I can't even make money off of it because it got copyright claimed for some of the music, so the fact that this is my 4th most popular... No, we're redoing this. So I said a while back that I wasn't going to make videos about the newer Disventure Camp seasons. I watched Season 4, figured that was enough, and then I was content to move on. But I decided that I would make an exception for the Season 2 remake because it's not really a new season. OG Season 2, in retrospect, was not good, but it still kinda means something to me, and since it was how I started talking about Disventure Camp, it only feels right to take a look at the remake as well. My plan for this season was to wait until I could binge the whole thing, and then immediately get to work on the script while everything was still fresh on my mind. So everything I'm saying right now is something that I wrote moments after finishing episode 13. So I'd like to ask you to take it in good faith when I say that Disventure Camp Season 2 is so good. I loved almost every moment of this season. It took everything that worked about the original Season 2, took out most of the unpleasant content, slapped a new coat of paint on it, and gave the actors some actual voice direction. And it's astounding! I was only planning to watch a couple episodes Thursday night, but then I got so hooked I just binged the entire thing! I was so invested in a season that I'd technically already seen, and admittedly that was mostly towards the final few episodes, but my point still stands. You probably want me to go into specifics, so I will do that now, starting off with the only D tier ranking in this video.
I'll be honest, I never liked that puppet thing.
There's really no reason to count these two separately, so I'm just gonna have them share joint last place. So, prior to this moment, I've never really talked about Marcus and Nina in any of my other videos aside from occasionally making fun of them a little bit. This is because I do not like or respect either of them. Or, I didn't at the time, but things are different now, you get what I mean. I definitely don't like them now, but I think they are passable enough to get a mention in the video. Marcus is fine. He's the closest thing this season has to a chef character, and he does okay in that role. His main purpose in the season is to be a foil for Crystal and give her someone to talk to during her breakdowns, and he's pretty good at that. It's not much, but Marcus is arguably the least important character in this season, so I think that's fine. Nina's writing, likewise, is definitely better here. I think her dialogue and physical comedy have noticeably improved. She never made me laugh, but I didn't want to die every time she appeared on screen, so that is an improvement. I still think the idea of a possessed doll in this series is a little bit weird given how grounded the setting usually is. The giant clown robot from season 4 is probably just as unrealistic, but somehow I have an easier time accepting that. I guess I don't mind her being here. Marcus would be pretty boring on his own, but I still don't like her all that much. I don't like the way that Nina sounds, and I'm not going to come down on the VA for that because I'm fairly sure that English is their second language, and if I were trying to voice something in Spanish, I think I would sound significantly worse. But yeah, these two are whatever, which is an improvement over the beta, so I'll take what I can get.
We are the crystal gems.
I think that every character this season has improved by a notable amount. Some characters are leaps and bounds better than their beta counterparts, and others only improve by a little bit. Oliver is in that latter category. I don't have too much to say about Oliver. He's really not that different from Season 2 beta, but there are some minor improvements here and there. I think the biggest improvement on Oliver's part is actually during episode 1 when he's a contestant. I like how rather than calling Maggie a monster, he just chooses to avoid her because he thinks her size makes her a threat. Still a bit rude, but more understandable, and I think that fits with the wholesome good guy image that ONC wants to give him. I also like how he gets really depressed when he gets eliminated and he thinks he's never gonna be anyone in life. See, I think that's funny. I like my first boots to be funny, and Oliver does a pretty good job of that. Him becoming an intern is a nice way to keep him included in the narrative, and I think he bounces off Crystal well enough. This is more so Crystal's plotline than his, so I'll go into more specifics when we get to her. I know that Crystal's dad is named Christoph McLean, which I think is hilarious, but for the sake of comparison, I'm just gonna refer to him as Chris McLean, because that was the original intention, and I think that's what they're trying to go for in the season. And in that sense, I like how Oliver highlights Crystal's differences from Chris. Whereas Chris treated all of his interns like disposable bodies, Crystal learns to treat Oliver with respect, and the two eventually become friends. So Oliver by himself definitely isn't a showstopper, but he was never meant to be, and for what he is, I think he does a pretty good job.
We are crystal.
God, it's so crazy to think that there used to be a time when I thought that Crystal was the worst thing about Disventure Camp. Like, wow, we've really been through a lot, haven't we? I did not hold back with Crystal in my original video, and I think I actually did quite a bit of damage to her reputation at the time. I felt really powerful for that. I think by now we've all reached the point where no one really gives a shit about the hosts anymore, so considering this might be the last time anyone looks at Crystal through an analytical lens, I'm gonna make this count. Crystal McLean was originally conceptualized as the daughter of Chris McLean, and is now the daughter of a very obvious stand-in for Chris McLean. And her story in DC2 is about her taking on Disventure Camp to prove herself as a host, and to get back at her dad for being a deadbeat. But in her pursuit of the ratings, she begins showing several of Chris's sadistic tendencies, putting the contestants in more and more danger for the sake of higher numbers. Now, in the original, this was utterly insufferable. The reason why Chris McLean worked so well is because in addition to all of his sadistic tendencies, he had enough charisma to sink a ship. He's an awful person, but he's so funny with how he talks about the contestants and the things he does, we can't help but be endeared to him. What also helps is that Total Drama is a show with a lot of cartoon logic and a lighter atmosphere, so you don't have to take Chris abusing his campers that seriously most of the time. But with Crystal, it felt like most of what she was doing was a little too real. I'm gonna use the Secrets Challenge as a reference since we've seen it 3 times and it makes for a good analogy. In Total Drama, Chris was using this challenge to make people reveal that they were a bedwetter, or they farted during a date, or that their real name is Beverly. In the DC2 beta, Crystal was bringing up things like abortion and sex changes, which as you can imagine is a bridge too far. Thankfully, Remake Crystal does do a lot to try to fix this. The secret revealing challenge in the remake does have her ask questions that cross boundaries, but not to the degree of the beta. I'd say it's a step up from the Roti challenge enhanced by DC2's grounded cast reacting to these secrets in realistic ways, and I think that's the way to go. Episode 5, much like in the original, is still rough. Crystal is utterly detestable in this episode, but I think she's at an acceptable level of detestable, if nothing else, because at least Tess doesn't have to burn her medication. But I think episode 6 and onwards are really where new Crystal starts to come into her own. I think Crystal's connection with Lake is quite nice, especially with how it manifests in episode 6. Lake being the one to call her out during episode 5, and Crystal putting her grudge aside upon hearing what Lake's home life is like is pretty good character development. This whole thing didn't feel earned in the original, but the remake does a good job building a connection between them, and that works for me. I'm not super invested in Crystal as a character, but I don't hate her plotline like I did in the original, and it feels far less intrusive now, which is a bonus. I've noticed that new Crystal is a bit more sarcastic and sassy, and I do like that change for her character. Props to the VA, I think they have notably improved since the beta. So yeah, Crystal is competent now, perfectly serviceable, sometimes even a bit enjoyable. Good job, Crystal. I never thought we'd make it here, but you did it.
Sometimes.
Carol is an interesting case. I guess if you were to ever write a second boot who returns to the game only to immediately get eliminated the next episode, this is a very good way to handle that. Let's just get the obvious out of the way first. Carol's new VA is 10, 20, 50 times better than the original. I hated Carol's original voice. Quite frankly, she sounded like a dying parrot. But new Carol manages to capture that annoying middle-aged woman energy while still sounding pleasant to listen to. And she can sing too. Okay, Venetia, madam, your talents will not go unappreciated here. Thank you for your service. Also, thank you for not being a Zionist. That also helps. I think the new voice does a lot of heavy lifting in terms of making Carol more tolerable, and I think it works very well with the way that Carol is characterized in the remake. Personality-wise, she's mostly the same. She's a spin on the Karen archetype, very grumpy, very short with people. But she does have the quirk of being good with animals to keep her from being entirely one-dimensional. In the original, Carol being an animal lover felt very tacked on, like they knew that she needed more character traits and just picked one out of a hat. Again, this probably has to do with the performance, but seeing new Carol interact with spiders and wolves and moose in such a kind and gentle way, I don't know, for some reason it feels more genuine here. And I think that helps this version of Carol feel a lot more sympathetic and reasonable than the one in the beta, and I think that works for her. Lest we forget, Carol is primarily a meanie zucchini. Her main role in the season is to cause conflict, mainly with James and Aiden, and I think she does a very solid job of this. James flipping on Carol is what causes the first big rift in his relationship with Aiden, so when Carol comes back and they have to take her down, things kind of come full circle. In episode 2, taking out Carol is what puts strain on their relationship, but in episode 9, taking her out is what brings them closer together, and I think it's interesting how that works out. Carol is only an active antagonist in episode 9, but to her credit, she does a good job of stirring the pot. In addition to helping James and Aiden, she's also a pivotal part in Rhea's slow transition to villainy. She outright tells Rhea how people like James have resorted to dirty tactics in order to make it farther, and how Rhea should do the same in order to keep up. Granted, I don't think Carol intended to send Rhea down that path. I think she was just trying to villainize James in order to get Rhea's vote, but still very good writing nonetheless. Going into it, I knew the elimination order of this season would be unchanged from the beta, which makes sense to me. You can't really change all that much with All-Stars happening later down the timeline. Although I did hear a rumor that Carol's return might have been the only thing that they cut, and initially I was disappointed that this did not happen. But given everything I've went over, with how she impacts the final 3, and with this version of Carol being significantly more pleasant, I'm actually okay with her. One added detail that I do like is that it's implied by the ending that Aiden actually does get to make amends with this version of Carol. Which I do like, because the beef between them started over something that Aiden didn't even do, and I think it further emphasizes the idea that DC2's cast had a lot of people who act abrasively or do bad things, but they can still see eye to eye with each other as long as they're not Yule. This is a bigger theme of the season that pertains to more characters than just Carol, so I'll save that discussion for later. But I do like how this character, who is initially shown as just a Karen, does have some heart to her. I may not love everything about Carol, but given what her character concept was, I think this was a pretty good way to make use of her. Kai is another case where his writing is very similar between seasons, but because the production value of the remake is so much better, Kai is better. Kai has never been a complicated character, and he still isn't. He's a chill zen dude who's just here to spread good vibes. I wouldn't go as far as to say that he's just a male version of Dawn from Revenge of the Island, but they do share a lot of similarities, and I'm fairly confident that Dawn is his main inspiration. Aside from his base personality, Kai has two things going for him. He likes Maggie, and he hates Yule. I think that Kagi is a fine relationship. These two do have some nice scenes together, and it is nice to see a guy treating Maggie well. They are mildly cute, I guess, and not much else, but you know what? They're both eliminated before episode 5, that's about as much as I can ask for. Any less, and I think they'd feel boring. Any more, and I'd feel that they needed more time. This really is the Goldilocks zone. But as nice as Kagi is, it doesn't hold a candle to the incredible pairing that is Kai and Yule. Okay, they're not that incredible, but I do think that these two do have some chemistry together, and I think it's really funny when the fandom tries to make them gay. Low-key, if Odd Nation decided that they wanted to make a spin-off focused on Kai and Yule, I would support that. But when you talk about Kai, and by extension when you talk about Kai in relation to Yule, there's really only one moment that you can reference, and I feel like I should just play that for you right now.
Maggie is so big that she—
I've had it with you! You self-obsessed, ego-driven, miserable sack of shit! To take it out on someone as beautiful and kind-hearted as Maggie and grind her to dust to fuel your addiction and negativity just shows how empty you are! You're constantly spitting bile because you can't stand to be by your lonesome for 5 seconds! Maybe if you weren't so hollow, you wouldn't make your self-hatred everyone else's problem! You miserable piece of asshole mother—
Obviously, I had to censor a few swears since Kai thought it was appropriate to use curse words on my Christian YouTube channel, but I think you get the point. Funny as this scene is, I think the most telling thing about it is how much Kai's VA has improved since the beta. Like, the original Crash Out was funny, but this is concentrated hatred, and it sells the moment so much more. If I really wanted to cheap out on Kai's section, I would have just said, hey, the voice acting is a lot better, and left it at that, but I feel like I have to give each of these characters at least a little bit of analysis, so this is why I've typed up 2 pages of notes over Kai. Jokes aside though, I think the improvement to the voice acting is the best thing about new Kai, and of most characters if I'm honest. JPEG, I know that you're watching this, so I'd just like to say that I think you did a very good job here. I'm proud of you. But yeah, that's basically it. There's not much to talk about with Kai. If anything, Remake Kai feels like the character that he was always meant to be, and it's nice seeing JPEG and ONC manage to pull that off.
Hey all, Scott here, and
so far, this list has basically been going along the elimination order plus the host sprinkled in, and this is where we stop following that pattern. I think that every character in this season, besides maybe one exception, is a notable improvement over their beta counterparts. But you know, when that character is Allie, that doesn't say very much, now does it? I do like her. I think this is the best version of Allie that we've ever gotten, and I do enjoy her more than every character I listed previously. But compared to everyone else who made it to the merge, I don't think she's bringing it like the others are. One thing I do like about the new Season 2 is that the cast spends more time interacting with people outside of their immediate cliques. In the beta, it felt like people mostly stuck with their core friend group and never really ventured outside of that. But even in the remake, I don't think Allie has much going on outside of her plot with Hunter, and she still feels like the weakest link of the trio, and that absolutely would have been okay if she was the one who went out in episode 7, but she was not. I still think a lot of what did work for Allie in the beta does work better here. I think she and Hunter have much stronger chemistry, even if Hunter is doing all of the heavy lifting. And I think she and are much more convincing as friends now. The scene between them in episode 6 is still very nice, even if Allie isn't the focus. I do like how she goes the extra mile of supporting a friend in need. These two have a very sweet relationship, and while I would have liked to see more of them together, I think everyone who outplaced them did pull their weight, so I'm okay with what we got. But man, you know, if these two were guys, they'd have been fucking. Odd Nations never would have let that pass up, so the fact that they're not together, you know what? Kinda lame, but fuck it, timeline, I get it. Yeah, fuck. We're moving past it. I guess if I had to point out any specific highlights, one thing I do like about Allie is her role in Lake's elimination. In the beta, Carol got to give Allie and Hunter immunity for rejoining the game just as a consolation prize, which felt pretty arbitrary, but in the remake, Allie actually strategizes with Hunter and Carol in order to sway the vote, and I do like this change. Allie using an advantage gives her some much needed agency in the game, and makes her feel like she actually has a purpose in the competition, which, you know, good on her. Unfortunately, no amount of good writing is going to change the fact that this is Allie. She didn't do anything wrong this season, she just never clicked with me. I guess, as an analogy, with every character above Allie on this list, I felt a spark of excitement as I was watching them, and I knew in those moments that they were cooking. With Allie, that spark was more of a little jolt. It was something, but whenever she was the focus of a scene, I couldn't help but feel like I'd rather be watching someone else. Outside of everything with her not polycule, it feels like the most she has to offer is gaming references, and if nothing else, I don't think her gaming references are necessarily funny, but I think they're a lot more authentic. I believe that this version of Allie is a real person who enjoys video games, and not a paid actor meant to fulfill a certain niche. I think she's a good character now, but not as good as I would have wanted the 6th place finisher to be. I felt like she should have been eliminated earlier in the beta, and unfortunately, I still feel that way now. Again, I know they literally couldn't change that because this is a remake and the order is already set in stone, but just hypotheticals here. I think one of the Azaleas makes more sense to take her spot. I enjoy them more, and I think they add more to the overall narrative, but Allie, she's okay. She's just never really wowed me, and that's okay. As far as this season is concerned, I still appreciate her for what she does, which I'm saying about a lot of characters, I realize. But there is one awesome thing about Alice and Amber in this season, and it is the fact that they kept "Thank you, I'm going there." That is Disventure Camp history, and I'm so glad that it's still intact.
All you wanna do is see me turn into a giant woman.
Alright, B tier time. If the last tier was all of the characters that I liked okay, then this tier comprises all of the people that I like that are more than okay. And with that descriptor in mind, I think that Maggie is the perfect character to start us off. So I think I've actually got quite a bit to talk about here, since this is basically a brand new character. You are not a fan of Maggie in the Season 2 beta, because she wasn't so much a character as she was a body on the orange team to be eliminated, I guess? And ONC definitely recognized how underbaked she was, because they really took the time to develop her into someone who actually feels like she has an impact on the season. To start off, we have a brand new VA. This is good. Old Maggie didn't sound atrocious, but you know, still Season 2 voice acting, a lot of room for improvement. I think the new voice fits her a lot better. It sounds very sweet and almost has this fluttery quality to it, which I think encapsulates Maggie's kind personality very well. Hearing the new Maggie voice, I couldn't help but imagine Money from BFDIE if she was voiced by Kenzie Bryant, and how Money would probably be a lot more well-liked if she sounded that way. Oh well, not the topic of this video. Now, initially, I was worried that they were going to overcorrect with Maggie and give her way more screen time than a 4th boot needed, but looking back, she only had a handful of new scenes. There were a lot of scenes during the beta where Maggie just kind of existed there without doing all that much, and the remake adds on to them by making Maggie a more active participant in those scenes. Used to be, she was just the 3rd member of the Rosa and Lake alliance, but now she feels like an actual member of that friend group. When Rosa and Lake are conflicted about the episode 2 vote, Maggie is the one who they rely on to break the tie. It's a small gesture, but I like that we get to see these 3 strategizing together, and I like that Maggie plays an important role in the vote discussion. I think her relationship with Rosa, likewise, is much stronger now. They hit many of the same plot beats that they do in the beta. Maggie is shy, Rosa wants to look out for her, she threatens to beat up Yule for all the insults he sends Maggie's way, and then after Maggie's eliminated, Rosa never mentions her again. But now that Maggie actually has a personality, I care about that stuff now. I like the way that these two rub off on each other. It's Rosa's support and friendship that allows Maggie to find her voice and stand up for herself. And we get to see the fruits of her labor in episode 4 where Maggie explodes on Crystal. And I like how Crystal revealing that Hunter was bullied is the thing that triggered that, because this early on, Hunter barely had any self-confidence. So Maggie standing up for him and inspiring him to put himself out there, I don't know, there's something about that I really do like. There's another scene where Maggie comforts Rosa after she and Lake had an argument, and I like this scene as well for the same reasons. Maggie helps Rosa with her own advice, telling her to confront her problems with Lake because they can be easily fixed, which is a nice way of bringing Maggie's arc full circle. Maggie has a notable impact on both Rosa and Hunter, which continues well after she's eliminated. Which is crazy because I don't even think Beta Maggie was mentioned after her elimination. For someone who only competed for 4 episodes, I give Maggie my seal of approval. Now we can actually acknowledge her as a Disventure Camp character. Hooray!
Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying this episode, we would really appreciate your support by liking the video, writing a nice comment, and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. You can also
Fuck me in the ass.
So I am naturally making a lot of comparisons to the original Season 2 when I talk about these characters, and I really hope you're okay with that because that's mostly what we're doing in this section. I do want to make mention of important things that happen in this season. It just so happens that most of those things were plot beats from the original Season 2, which I've already covered. I can't just pretend that I'm not retreading old ground, but I can use all of that as a reference to highlight how much ONC has improved. Case in point, my guy Connor. Now, for those of you who recall, when I covered Disventure Camp Season 2 Version 1, Connor was number 2 on that list, and now he's all the way down at 9th. You may be asking what he did wrong to drop 7 places, and the answer is nothing. So earlier I said that everyone in the remake was an upgrade compared to their original counterparts, with maybe one exception. Connor is that exception. Not because I think he's worse in this season, I just think that with the changes to the writing, everyone in this season is as good as or better than Connor in the beta. Whereas everyone else got an upgrade between seasons, I think Connor got a side grade. Connor was a very prominent presence during the first 3 episodes of the beta. He had an interesting storyline, a great personality, and a lot of potential. And then he got booted in episode 3, and I kinda felt like he should have gone further. His storyline in both seasons is focused around him coming to terms with his age. He initially tried to present himself as hip with the kids, but that just wasn't who he was. And once he started acting his age, he finally found his place within the cast. I like this storyline a lot, and it paints Connor as a very rootable guy. In the remake, he's still the same likable guy from the original, but I feel like he stands out a little bit less because the other characters are actually interesting and fun to watch. And I think the person who highlights this the most is Rhea. I never considered this at the time, but looking back on the beta, Connor really overshadowed Rhea whenever they were on screen together. In particular, I think the conversations they had in episodes 2 and 3 were ultimately for Connor, with Rhea being his support. But I feel like the remake flips it around. Rhea still gives Connor someone to relate to and helps him come to terms with his age, but there's a greater emphasis put on her struggles and her desire to fit in and find satisfaction with her life. And ultimately, I think this is for the best, because going in, I knew that Rhea was going to make the final 2, whereas Connor wouldn't even make it to episode 4. So giving more focus to a merger who didn't have great characterization in the original is always a welcome change. I believe a few of Connor's scenes did get cut. I know he lost the scene with Hunter in episode 3. And considering that the heart-to-heart between Maggie and Rosa is probably what replaced it, this is a trade that I am more than happy to make. So pre-elimination, I think Connor does take more of a backseat, but he still does his part to support Rhea, and because of that, I like their dynamics so much more now. Case in point, episodes 12 and 13. This guy is watching this woman, who he clearly has feelings for, resort to dirty tactics and nasty behavior in order to get a leg up in the finale. He has to grapple with the one person he truly bonded with lashing out at him because she thinks he's slowing him down, and watching him being yelled at like that, I felt for the guy. Michael Kim has been acting as Connor for years now, and it's these scenes that really show me how far he's come and how much he now understands Connor as a character. Connor is a sentimental guy and a kind soul, and the thing I admire most about him is how he's always willing to go the extra mile for the people he cares about. Not many people would have been willing to give Rhea a second chance, especially after she almost let Aiden fall off that cliff, but despite it all, Connor's still at the end, ready to comfort Rhea after her loss. He's the one person who knows that Rhea is better than the person she portrayed herself to be, and in that moment, he does get through to her. This obviously does not last because, you know, all-stars, but I think it's a great conclusion to both of their arcs, and we'll go into more detail about that once we get to Rhea's section. Did Connor get power crept by the rest of the cast? Most certainly, but considering how early he goes out, I think the season is ultimately better with these changes. And even still, Connor is just as good as ever, and he serves as a great benchmark for how everyone else has improved. Don't let his relatively low placement make you think otherwise. Unk still got it.
Where am I?
Rise and shine, baby girl. Calm down. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk. You can talk, can't you?
I can, yes. But
What do you want with me? Why am I here? Who are you?
Call me Paula. You can think of me as a spirit from a higher dimensional plane. And I'm here to help you.
Like some sort of angel.
Yes, like a guardian angel. And by the looks of it, you could use one. You've really been through a lot, haven't you?
My day was actually going pretty well until I got attacked by that monster. If you really are here to help, could you please send me back home?
Tess, that thing was twice your size and willing to kill you. How do you think you got out of that encounter?
Well,
That's right, princess! That was all me! Let's see Hunter and Allie try to do that.
Am I dead? Is this the afterlife? Please, I need you to tell me what's going on. I don't think I can handle it.
Darling, you worry too much.
I know. This is just so much to take in.
And that's why I'm here. You and I have a lot to work through together, but you're obviously very overwhelmed right now. So maybe it would be easier if I gave you something to watch?
Is she talking about me?
You can ignore this part. Her opinions are terrible. She's also totally racist, so you don't need to take her seriously. But I want you to pay attention to what she says about your friends.
Now, what that says about me, I have no idea. I guess that's up for you to decide. Keith Yeti, what did you think?
You cannot put that shit on YouTube.
Come on, Keith Yeti, I thought it was a pretty good section.
You are a deviant, and I am very frightened.
Yeah, be frightened all you like. We're moving on to number 7.
I'm gonna say the N-word. That's racist, you can't say the N-word!
Okay, so remember literally a minute ago when I said that everyone got an upgrade except for Connor? Well, I think Yule is in a similar boat, but it is a little bit more complicated. Yule is a specimen of a character. In a season filled with morally gray characters, Yule is just a straight-up asshole. He's incredibly mean, he's easily angered, and he's bigoted towards every marginalized group under the sun. Overall, an awful human being, but he's awful in the same way that characters like Heather Chandler and Conquest are awful. Terrible, terrible people, unquestionably, but they're so charismatic and off the wall that you can't help but be endeared to them. Yule is set up as the de facto main antagonist of DC2. He's the one making alliances, and he's the one bullying the others. But come episode 5, when Yule comes up with a scheme to poison Aiden, James decides to turn the tables on him, eliminating Yule instead. It's a satisfying moment of karma for such a terrible guy, and also a bit of a subversion. Since, within the total drama format, we expect people like this to weasel their way out of these situations. Now, the big change with Yule between the original and the remake is that they made him so much worse of a person. In the original, Yule actually managed to win people over for a little while, but in the remake, basically everyone except James hates him frame 1. This does make him more of a one-dimensional villain, and I think the concept from the beta had more potential as a character, and I admittedly don't think this new one is as interesting, but given that this characterization aligns more with Yule in All-Stars, from a narrative perspective, this is probably the right call. ONC made a conscious effort to remove any likable or sympathetic traits from Yule, as evidenced by the fact that they made basically all of his dialogue a lot meaner and more hostile, and retconned him from being a North Korean refugee. And I realized quite some time ago that this was always the idea. Yule was always meant to be a one-note bad guy who never learns, and that's fine, one-note bad guys can be fun. But I think if I were writing for Disventure Camp, I would have written Yule as a character with a lot more nuance, because I think there are a lot of interesting storylines that could have been told with him. I don't often get into the habit of psychoanalyzing DC characters, but with Yule, I've always been interested to know what his fucking deal is. Why is he such a horrible person? What drove him to become the way that he is? What else is there to Yule Kim? And the remake pretty thoroughly confirmed that these are not questions that I need to be asking. He's awful because that's just how he is. Full stop. And I am a little disappointed that this mystery is dead, but I understand that this is a mystery I made up for myself, and DC is under no obligation to answer it for me. I do wish that Yule was more of a nuanced character, but I still like him for who he is. His voice actor gives an excellent performance, and he's just as funny as he was in the original. I did notice that a lot of his bigoted statements and jokes from the original were cut down. And while I do think some of these did work for his character, I understand that Disventure Camp's fandom does not take well to those types of jokes, so I can see why they were cut. I mean, lest we forget, there was a period of time where the fandom considered anyone who was a fan of Yule to be endorsing his bigoted actions. So in that sense, I think that Yule is a very good media literacy check for the fandom. God knows this community needs that. Yule may not be as interesting as I hoped he would be, but he serves the role of secondary antagonist very well. He was a good villain who got his fill of karma. There really isn't anything for me to complain about.
You utter fool! German science is the finest in the world!
We are now in the A tier. These are all the characters that I really enjoyed and had a lot of fun watching. I know you're trying to do the math in your head to figure out who's left, and you don't have to do that. It's the top 5 plus Lake. And the top 6 for this video will be the top 5 plus Lake. Ah, Lake. Almost everyone's favorite Disventure camp character until she got second boot in All-Stars and almost everyone forgot about her. I give Lake a lot of credit for being one of the few characters in the beta with an actually pretty good storyline. Lake is the prodigy, the child of a very prestigious family who pushes her to succeed at all costs. Lake is constantly under their thumb and joins Disventure camp to have a little bit of freedom in her life. She is sheltered, constantly unsure of herself, and still under her parents' influence even when they aren't there. It's through characters like Rosa, Maggie, and Rhea that Lake is able to come to terms with how unhappy she is, inspiring her to stand up for herself and move away from her parents. This is a plotline that has been done a lot in other pieces of media, and in the original I think it was a little generic, but I think the remaster did get me on board. I like that Lake and Rosa actually have a bit of conflict during episode 3. Even though Rosa is Lake's friend and clearly has her best interest in mind, this early on in the series, Lake still doesn't see that her family is causing her so much grief. And I think it makes sense for her to be upset at Rosa for laying into her family so much. That's a cycle that Lake needed to break on her own. Actually watching her do that feels a lot more rewarding now because the remake generally does a much better job at characterizing her. It's a lot of small things, such as additional scenes like the ones with Rosa and Maggie, and general improvements to the dialogue make Lake feel a lot more complete. I liked Lake and Aiden's friendship in the original, but the remake makes their connection stronger in almost every way. Admittedly, this is more so on Aiden's end, who we will get to later, but I just think they have way more chemistry in the remake. The one problem I have with their interactions, and this is totally just a pet peeve of mine, if one of the characters in a piece of media is a writer and someone else is talking about their writing, for some reason, that really puts me off. I couldn't tell you why that is, only that there is quite a bit of that with these two, but I know it's just a me thing, and I don't think less of the characters for that. I think everything between Lake and Crystal also works better. Crystal is toned down, so I don't want to die every time she's on screen, and that allows me to actually engage with the dynamic that these two have. We live in a post-Staff Stories world now, and since ONC now has a clearer picture of Crystal's home life, I think drawing a connection between these two feels a lot more justified. I'd like to elaborate more on why Lake is so much better, but I don't think ONC made any drastic changes with her. This is almost the exact same character we saw in the beta, but with the benefit of better dialogue and a few added scenes. That's really all she needed. Lake always had one of the better character concepts. I think a lot of people can relate to a character who spent her entire life under her parents' thumb, and Lake finally standing up for herself and taking life into her own hands, I imagine is very cathartic for a lot of people. The irony of Lake being a lesbian is not lost on me. That is definitely not a coincidence. Good as she is though, she's going to just slightly miss out on the top 5.
I fucking hate you, but I love you.
It's everyone in the final 5, which is a good thing. I feel like if you're making a TD-inspired series, ideally you'd want the characters who make it far to end up as the favorites, because that's a sign that you've done something right. I don't know who the consensus favorites are for this season, but I've seen all 5 of these characters getting their flowers, which I think they deserve. And yes, that does include Rhea. Now, I have history with Rhea. In the past, whenever I spoke about Disventure Camp All-Stars, I would always make a point to talk about how terribly she was written and how much I hated her. If there are 2 things that most people know about me, it's that I hate Rhea and I like antelopes, but more on that first one. Season 2 Rhea is a struggling actress. She was an extra in several movies, but never really had that breakout role. So she signs up for Disventure Camp, hoping that being on TV will help boost her acting career and give her more opportunities. She's initially very meek. She has trouble talking to others, and the only person she really connects with early on is Connor. These two are a fair bit older than most of the cast, and they bond over this. Connor gives Rhea someone to confide in, someone to assure her that she's not alone, and once he's eliminated, he gives her a bottle of perfume to remind her of that. I may not like how it was used in All-Stars, but I've always been a fan of how the perfume bottle has been used to symbolize both Connor and Rhea's relationship, while also serving as a reward for Rhea being her honest, good-natured self. which is why whenever she's at her worst, she ends up losing it. DC2 is a season without a consistent villain. Yule was a fake out, Carol was villainous for the one episode she competed in post-return, and for the last 4 episodes of the season, Rhea took over main villain duty. In the original, this felt a little bit forced, I won't lie. And this is probably because in the CamiraZone draft of the season, Rhea wasn't a villain, just making a guess there. And maybe this is just me picking up on minor details because I knew what would happen, but I feel like Rhea's heel turn actually makes more sense now. The crucial moments of her heel turn are now better highlighted, such as Rhea intentionally flipping on Lake in episode 8, and the conversation with Allie in episode 9 where she gets her "it's just a game so I can do whatever I need to" mentality. I also feel that Remake Rhea's personality is a lot more consistent with her actions. What made all of this so weird in the beta is that Rhea's heel turn was portrayed as "everyone else is playing dirty, so I'm going to be evil now," and in the remake it's more like "everyone else is playing dirty, so now I'm going to play more aggressively," which is a minor change, but it helps so much, and this is shown best in episodes 10 and 11. The confrontation between Rhea and Rosa is much better now, but I feel like most of the improvement is on Rosa's end, so we will save most of that for her section. But I will say that Rhea feels so much more genuine in this scene. It's so clear that she wants and expects Rosa to see this as a game move, but when you exploit people's backgrounds like that and cause so much damage to their reputation, that's the type of thing that you can only take personally. Maybe if Rhea was poor and a lesbian, then people would want to forgive her, but she isn't, so oh well. This leads to episode 11, which I think is a drastic improvement for Rhea. In the original, between episodes 10 and 11, it felt like they flipped a switch and suddenly Rhea turned into Heather. But now she's more toned down, less outright evil, and more cutthroat and competitive, which I think works for her. It really feels like she's worked out a path to the end and is enjoying the favorable position that she has. I'd say that Rhea doesn't fully turn evil until Connor leaves her behind in episode 12, and by that point I think such a personality change is justified. Rhea mistreated Connor, so he gave up on her, and without any more allies to rely on, she's forced to double down on her malicious behavior in order to get ahead, and that's ultimately why she loses. I can sympathize with DC2 Rhea because she really feels like someone who got swept up in the competition and didn't realize the severity of her actions. This version of Rhea isn't the most emotionally aware. She copies the behaviors of people like James and Yule without realizing that their manipulative behavior didn't really help them in the long run. With Yule, it got him eliminated with no one in his corner, and James had to actively grow out of that mentality in order to get the guy that actually made him happy. So I think for this reason, she's the perfect person to pair with James in the finale, since their arcs mirror each other in a very satisfying way. I do like this ending. I think that Connor supporting her and her getting several acting opportunities in villainous roles is a good way to bring her story to a close. She learned her lesson and can still use her experiences to her advantage. Of course though, this isn't where her story ends, so I might as well address that. In terms of how this season affects my opinion of All-Stars Rhea, I do think I like her a little bit more. I still don't enjoy Decast Rhea, but the Season 2 remake does put into perspective a lot of what they were trying to go for in that season. There is an attempt to write something compelling here, and if I had watched the Season 2 remake first, I probably would have been more invested in everything that Connor and Rhea had going on in All-Stars. I don't think it changes the All-Stars tier list, but for me, it does settle a very interesting debate I've seen floating around online. So I will now state my opinion on the matter. Between Rhea and Logan, I now think definitively Rhea is the better winner. Because Season 2 really went the extra mile to show me that Rhea is a character with genuine effort put into her writing. She has a story to tell, and with this second chance, ONC did their absolute best to make that story resonant and compelling, and I personally think they succeeded in doing that. I really never thought this day would come, but ONC did Rhea right, and I would be remiss if I didn't give them their flowers for doing that. I think I've always been more partial to Aiden than the average person. Like, he's always had his diehard fans and his explosive haters, and as of DC5, that is more true than ever. When I actually bothered to watch the thing, I think Aiden was actually one of my favorite characters on the Favorites tribe in Fans vs. Favorites, because, unlike a lot of people, he actually bothered to do something. Low-key, I think that DC5 Aiden is kind of a better version of Ellie, but I know that no one is going to want to entertain that idea, so let us move to Season 2. So believe it or not, I did actually bring up DC5 Aiden for a reason, because I think that the DC2 remake did a lot to reinvent Aiden as a character, and I think that all future versions of the character are going to be based on this one. And I'm going to try my best to explain to you why I think this is a good thing, actually. I never truly disliked Aiden at any point in time, but I always had the feeling that in both DC2 beta and DCAS, he wasn't really able to reach his full potential. He had a few things going for him in the beta, but due to how rigid that season's writing and voice direction was, he did kinda come off as the generic nice guy a lot of the time. Remastered Aiden, on the other hand, takes everything that worked for the OG Aiden, remixes everything else, and gives us the best version of the character that this show has ever made. I love new Aiden. They really lean into the angle that he's a big Disventure camp fan who got rejected from Season 1, and I think that makes him feel a lot more distinct. It's such a small thing, but I love the way they changed Aiden's first interaction with Oliver. In the original, it was a very standard, nice interaction. The two make small talk, Aiden's like, "Do I recognize you?" Oliver's like, "I was an intern last season," and that's about it. But this time, Aiden denies having even watched Season 1, telling Oliver that he just mistook him for someone else, before immediately cutting to a confessional where he berates himself for not recognizing an ex-production member on his favorite show. I think this scene does a really good job showing us what we can expect from the new Aiden. He's far more proactive, actually bothering to strategize and even leading the charge on a few votes. I wouldn't have thought to make Aiden the main guy behind Oliver's elimination, but given what Aiden knows about the show, I can get behind him doing this. You might even argue that it paints him in an unheroic light, but low-key, I really like that. Aiden does have a bit of a temper, and it doesn't take a lot to provoke him, but in most cases, I felt like whenever he blew up at someone, I could understand where he was coming from. As an example, he never snaps at Lake because he never has a reason to get mad at her, but James is, let's just say, unreliable in the early part of the season, and I could empathize with Aiden's struggle to keep him on track. He honestly kind of reminds me of Island Courtney in a way, although Aiden is admittedly not quite as abrasive as she was. He's also not as prepared for the game as he thought he was, as proven by Carol. Aiden and Carol's dynamic used to mean nothing. Initially, post-return, once Aiden figured out that Carol was being fake, he started working against her. She broke her leg, he didn't feel bad, and that was that. But in the remake, when Aiden accidentally breaks Carol's leg, he does not take it well. And that leads into this really nice scene at the start of episode 10 where Aiden breaks down. He confides in James about how stressed he is, with him having no idea who to trust, what to do, or how to go about the rest of the game. I really felt for Aiden in this scene, and I really appreciated James for comforting him. Which of course gives me an excellent segue to talk about Jaden as a pairing. From Aiden's side, I really did enjoy watching this slightly neurotic guy slowly start to let his walls down and trust James as the two began to bond. You can tell that Aiden is a guy with some major self-esteem issues, and James is the exact type of guy to help him come to terms with his feelings and support him when he's at his lowest. Their chemistry now is even better than it was in the beta, and these two interacting was consistently the highlight of my watch through. I want to bring up the swimming scene in episode 11 because if I can be honest, I do think parts of this scene are better in the beta. Overall, I do think the remake does it better. In particular, I think Aiden nervously mentioning his scars does fit his character better than alluding to a sensitive question in episode 4, especially since that question now no longer exists. But there were elements of the original that I did really like. So I decided to write my own version of the scene, which I think takes the best elements from both versions. The scene starts with both men going swimming, and James encourages Aiden to take off his shirt. Aiden declines, visibly uncomfortable. James apologizes, worried that he made a mistake, and Aiden assures him that he didn't say anything wrong. After a moment, Aiden takes a breath and asks James if he can tell him something important, to which James, now a little bit worried for Aiden, agrees. Aiden tells James that he's never felt confident about his body. Even when he was a kid, he knew that something was wrong and that he wanted to change. He had surgery a while ago to help affirm himself, but the scars haven't fully healed and he doesn't want James to see them. Every once in a while, we cut to James as he reacts to Aiden's words in real time, and it's clear that he's very easily putting the pieces together, and once Aiden finishes talking, James knows exactly what he means. James swims up to Aiden, pulls him close, and tells him that he likes Aiden for who he is, that Aiden is still the same amazing man he met on day 1, and nothing is going to change that. Then they smile, they hug, and then everything that happens later in the episode stings even more. I promise I still like the scene as is. This is just a case of me trying to make a good scene potentially even better. Speaking of, the part where Rhea breaks James and Aiden up hits so much harder now. So in the original, Aiden was incredibly angry after he thought James was using teasing him, and he still is in the remake, but more than anything, he's heartbroken. It's hard not to feel bad for Aiden. He's been through so much this season, and he really just needs to get away from such a high-stress environment. And I think that it is an incredible stroke of writing to get me on the edge of my seat wanting to see these two work things out even when I already knew what would happen. But we're gonna save the rest of that for James's section because we've already gone over a lot here. All of this is good enough reason to explain just how much of a glow-up Aiden had. But if I had to point to one definitive thing to explain why new Aiden is so incredible, it's Weister's acting. Weister did a good job in the beta, but now that he has actual voice direction and several years of experience voicing this character, the difference between seasons is night and day. Watching that scene with James and Aiden on the mountain really has put into perspective how much Weister has improved as an actor. I know you're watching this, by the way, Weister. God, I want to shake you. You did so good. This version of Aiden easily would have been #1 if he were in any other season, but in this case, I do think that 3 characters did outdo him. But the top of A tier is nothing to scoff at. I'm so glad he got such a good run.
I have never actually watched this show. I just put the clip here as a clever reference.
Second and third place were very tough to decide because I think they're both really good, and depending on the day, they honestly might go back and forth. But for the time being, while I'm scripting this video, I'm going to give third place to Hunter. I'm floored, honestly. I'm not even sure how to begin describing new Hunter because to say he's had a major glow up would be selling him short. Out of everyone in the cast, Hunter is the most different from his original incarnation, a change which I absolutely approve of. OG Hunter was portrayed as a very nonchalant, cool guy. His story, if you could even call it that, was him casually wooing Allie and Tess with his unfathomable riz, and ending the season in a relationship with both of them. CamiraZone, the original writer for DC2, has stated that he based a lot of Hunter's behavior on himself. So with that in mind, you can pretty easily make the connection that original Hunter mainly served as a vehicle to give this guy a power fantasy. He wanted Lake to join the harem too, by the way. New Hunter, by contrast, is a total loser. His label is literally the social failure, and the first few episodes waste no time establishing how much of a dork he is. I think this is funny because it does seem like a clear attempt to mock Karzar a little bit, but I think this new characterization is maybe the best thing to ever happen to Hunter. First and foremost, it allows for the writers to actually be funny with him. There are a lot of jokes about Hunter being a social failure. I especially like the detail that his favorite games include puzzles, solitaire, and single-player board games. But probably my favorite bit they do with Hunter involves this 20-question style card game that he keeps trying to get people to play with him. I wouldn't call it a running gag because I do think this is a very interesting character quirk, but they do play it for comedy quite a few times, and I think I smiled every time it came up. Oh, and the part in episode 8 where Hunter is the one in the shower instead of Allie, I like that as well. I also think this new characterization actually makes his plot with Allie and work a lot better, because I feel like new Hunter was actually created with the female gaze in mind. He's adorable and so sweet. Call me basic, but when it comes to my taste in men, Hunter is the Disventure camp character who gets the closest to what I like. You probably wouldn't guess that if I showed you the list of characters that I am attracted to, but that's neither here nor there. And even then, I don't think his main plot is where Hunter shines this season. Huntally was never really for me, and while I do like them better here, Allie, you know, she's still Allie, so kinda mid. And I like how he's now a part of the scene where—
Let me just skip over this part too. Nothing important here.
Wait, I want to hear what she's saying.
Breaks down in the cave. I mean, after Lake got taken away in the helicopter, Hunter was just kinda chilling by himself, so this is a good place to put him. But I think Hunter really excels in his interaction with the other characters. Again, I like how he and Maggie have a short-lived friendship, and I like that her standing up for him inspires him to do better in the game. He and Rosa have a dynamic in episode 10 that really only lasts for that episode, but I like it. More on that later. And while he and Aiden only interact a handful of times, I really like their scenes together. I think in episode 11 especially, these two bounce off of each other very well. I like the detail that Hunter actually breaks off his alliance with Rhea because he saw what she did to break up James and Aiden and wasn't okay with that. And I also like how even though Aiden does lash out at Hunter because, well, he was having a very bad day, Hunter still stands by him and convinces him to vote for Rhea, knowing that she's the main person at fault. And I couldn't help but notice Aiden smiling at Hunter during his exit to show that he really does like the guy, since he's been nothing but a good dude throughout the competition. I remember during my first video, I was a bit harsher on Hunter's voice acting than I was with a lot of others. He just came across as very flat and uninteresting, which I guess did fit for the character at the time. But given some actual voice direction, I'm assuming, and more experience with the character, JMO gives a very good performance this season. The beta really was holding him back. I guess the best way I can describe new Hunter, and some of you really aren't gonna like what I have to say here, I think he's just a better version of what they try to do with Benji. Granted, Benji was more overtly comic relief while Hunter mixes comedy with drama, but I feel like Hunter's funnier, he has a more interesting plotline, and his personality is way more enjoyable for me personally. I guess my only real complaint with this version of Hunter is that he's so good in Season 2 that, in a weird way, he kinda makes the All-Stars version of Hunter retroactively a little bit worse. All-Stars Hunter kinda feels like an amalgamation of the beta Hunter and the new Hunter, which makes sense considering the new Hunter didn't exist at that point. I wouldn't say he's been retroactively derailed or anything, but I think if I watched the new Season 2 first and then went to All-Stars, I'd like Hunter a lot less. But if that's the price I have to pay for Season 2 Hunter being as good as he is, then I'll take that in a heartbeat. Overall, Hunter absolutely blew me away. I never would have expected him to become one of my new favorite characters, not just for the season, but of Disventure Camp as a whole. But he's seriously locked in, and there's still 2 characters ahead of him.
Are you serious?
Yeah, okay.
I was tempted to say that Hunter had the biggest glow-up of anyone in the cast, and he still might, but I'm not fully confident in that claim because this season also has Rosa Maria. Oh my god. So, for those of you unaware, we used to have a phenomenon in this fandom that we like to call Rosa Maria syndrome. Rosa Maria syndrome defined any character, usually female, who is relegated to a purely supportive role. Their job in the season was to support another character and had little to no agency of their own. This term was inspired by Rosa Maria from the beta, who was exactly that. For most of the season, she balanced being Lake's support and Rhea's support, and while she did have a few character moments in episode 10 and the finale, I felt like most of it fell flat. But the remake attempts to portray Rosa as a supportive character while still making her feel important on her own, and I think it does this incredibly well. The season does a lot to flesh Rosa out, but in my opinion, the absolute best thing about new Rosa is unquestionably her new VA. So I won't lie, Rosa Maria's voice in the original was not the best. I can tell her old VA really did try, but their setup was obviously not great. In fact, you can hear microphone static in quite a few of her confessionals. The new VA, by contrast, sounds perfect. New Rosa sounds so much more energetic and passionate, which is exactly what the remake called for. And while good voice acting can do a lot to help a bad script, I imagine this was the case for Tetro Blue, DC2 Remake has a very good script. Rosa's label is the motherly figure. She's a teen mom who will do literally anything to support her daughter. And while on the show, she makes a point to play as honorably as possible so she can set a good example for her daughter. Rosa is a character who really shines with her dynamics, and I specifically want to highlight 3, those being Lake, Rhea, and James. Lake and Rosa are very straightforward. Lake is a sheltered girl whose parents control every aspect of her life, and Rosa, free spirit that she is constantly trying to support Lake and encourage her to pursue her own happiness. I like that Rosa's straightforward approach actually causes some friction between them, but ultimately these two make up, and Rosa's encouragement does help Lake separate from her parents and prove her independence. Something similar happens with Rhea, although it doesn't go quite as well. Rhea turns to Rosa after Connor has been eliminated, looking for some sort of support system, and Rosa is more than happy to give that to her. But Rhea is always second-guessing herself, and once the teams merge, she can't help but feel jealous of Rosa's bond with Lake, and this causes her to act out. If Lake serves as Rosa's encouragement to stay true to herself, then Rhea serves to test her. Because of Rhea, someone that Rosa considered a friend, Rosa was made to look like a thief on national television, something that I'm sure would really upset most people. And it does upset Rosa, but it doesn't make her forget who she is and what she wants her daughter to see when she grows older. The reason why Rosa barely edged out Hunter on the tier list is due to her role in the final 2 episodes of the season, because I think that's where she's at her absolute best. I think her defining moment as a character is her deciding to help Rhea escape the underwater cave even though she definitely didn't have to. And it's not because she's forgiven Rhea, no, she's still mad at her for framing her for stealing all those things. She does it because she believes that helping others is always the right thing to do, and those are values that she wants to instill in Sophia when she's old enough to watch Disventure Camp. Rosa Maria is the exact type of older sister figure that I think a lot of us really wish we had. She's always looking out for her friends and always willing to stand up to people who aren't treating them well. And it is hard to carry yourself like that all the time. Believe me, I wish I could curse out a lot of people who have treated me poorly. But because Rosa is trying to set an example and be her best self, she never falters, and I think that's really admirable. But even though she's resilient, she's not. When she's labeled a thief in episode 10, James, Aiden, and Rhea turn on her. And it's clear that these accusations really fuck with her mentally, which is why I appreciate Hunter comforting her when she's at her lowest. You can't always be the shoulder for someone else to lean on. Sometimes you need some support yourself. Now, to be fair, this scene was in the beta, but it didn't hit nearly as hard as it does now, and that's because looking back at every Rosa Maria scene, both in the beta and in the remake, the original Rosa Maria wasn't really a character. She had some degree of personality, yeah, but I feel like most of what she was could have been accomplished by someone else without much effort to change the writing. But Remake Rosa is dripping with personality, to the point where I wouldn't even consider her a support character, because I feel like her journey was just as interesting and just as relevant as Lake's or Rhea's. And that means something. I feel like most friend groups have a Rosa Maria, and if me saying that immediately made you think of someone, be sure to thank that person for all they've done, because they've probably got a lot of weight on their shoulders. Every Rosa Maria needs a Lake to have their back, a Hunter to support them from time to time, or a James to show them that they are appreciated. Speaking of, I did mention earlier that I really like the dynamic between Rosa Maria and James, but there is a reason why I haven't gone into detail about that yet. And if you've made it this far into the video, you can probably guess why.
James.
If you've been watching Total Drama or its fan projects for as long as I have, you tend to pick up on a few character archetypes. Identifying the hero, the villain, the comic relief, the fodder characters, all of that becomes second nature after a while. From time to time, you'll get cases like Yule and Rhea where there is a misdirect, but I don't think any character in this format has ever surprised me like James has. I wouldn't put James's story up there with some of my favorite stories in fiction, but for the Total Drama format, there really is something to this. The concept is simple. From episode 1, he's portrayed as a self-absorbed TikTok influencer. He only seems to care about growing his following, he gets into fights with people fairly often, and you get the sense that this guy only sees the people around him as stepping stones to greater fame. It would have been so easy to eliminate a guy like this in episode 5, continue Yule's tirade, and commit fully to Lake being Aiden's #1 dynamic. That's the kind of plot progression that I think Total Drama would have tried to go for, and while I'm sure that season would have been fine, I think this is better because James is the best. So let's get this one out of the way. In my opinion, James was easily the best part of the beta and the only reason why it wasn't complete garbage. James was, and is, endlessly charismatic and funny. In the beta, that was due to the vocal delivery of his VA, Badalt. Now, given that Badalt is a credited telenovela actor and also provided the Spanish voice of James in the DC2 beta, to which I think he did a very good job, it should become clear that English is Badalt's second language. You might think that this would make James's English voice sound weird, but no, James's beta voice was really captivating and basically defined the character. It's also very fun to do impressions of. Now, I was a little disheartened to hear that Badalt wouldn't be reprising the role, but admittedly, I think the new voice is better. I think the new VA does an excellent job giving James way more emotional range than he had in the beta. He's a much more animated character now, and that really works for him. His new voice helps him land jokes much easier and hit emotional beats far better, and that's good because he has a lot of both. I won't dwell too much on the comedy because for the most part, it's just everything I like in the beta except better. I think new James is a little bit less competent than his beta counterpart, a lot more impulsive and a lot more quick to anger. And I think this characterization makes a lot of James's actions make a lot more sense. One really questionable scene in the original was when James got Aiden to form an alliance with Carol only to go to the rest of the team and blow up Carol's game. It was not good strategy. But in the remake, these two just have beef from day one, and it's actually Aiden's plan to try and make an alliance. James just decides to blow up Carol's game out of spite because he doesn't like her, and I really like this change. Also, I'd be completely remiss if I didn't mention the phone call scene between him and the Night Butcher. God, I love this scene in the beta, and it's just as good here. But as far as his more serious characterization is concerned, I would call James a sleeper main character. He's not always in the spotlight, but when he is, he leaves an impression. After all, James is the one to take out Yule, who was, at the time, the biggest villain in the game. And he does this by turning Yule's plan of poisoning Aiden against him, which is such an anti-hero thing to do. And that brings him closer to Aiden, a guy who serves as an excellent red herring winner. If you're just doing a cursory watch through of the season, you might get distracted by all of Aiden's main characterisms, and might not pick up on everything that ONC set up with James. Such as the scene in episode 7 between him and Lake. The whole point of this conversation is Lake trying to tell James that he shouldn't define himself by his follower count. And James gets really defensive over this because that's what he's been doing for years on end. This is not just a one-off conversation. This topic actually gets brought up again in the final challenge. See, there's a moment in the finale of the beta that has a lot of implications about James's character, and admittedly, it did kind of feel like a last-minute thing. Not so in the remake. James reveals to Rosa in the finale that he had no friends growing up. Even though he had his sister, he was always craving a sense of validation and belonging. When he started blowing up on TikTok, he felt that for the first time. The rush of watching his follower count grow larger and larger became addicting to him, and he lost himself, constantly chasing that high in an attempt to get even more people to like him. But ultimately, strangers on the internet could only give him so much. What James actually needed was a support group to stick by his side, and he gets that in the form of Rosa and Aiden. Rosa and James did not always get along. At the start of the competition, James was completely fake and kind of an asshole, which is the exact type of person that Rosa cannot stand. Now, these two clash several times throughout the season. In particular, Rosa gets mad at James because she thinks that he voted off Lake. And in the next episode, James gets mad at Rosa because he believes that she stole his phone, and this is part of the reason why she gets eliminated. But when he's left in the finale with no supporters, Rosa's the only person to step up and try to help him in the challenge. And that to me says something about how, yes, some people can be shitty, but if they really want to improve, they can. Sometimes they just need a little encouragement to get things going. And this is why I love this relationship so much. Their personalities bounce off of each other very well, and every scene they share together is fun to watch. But obviously, James's biggest dynamic is with Aiden. We already went over his side earlier, so it's time to wrap things up with James. James begins their relationship with the intention of using Aiden to boost his follower count. This isn't too dissimilar to Caleb in Reboot 2, who flirted with Priya in an attempt to win her over as an ally. Now, I am aware that some people aren't fans of these types of plotlines because, oh, this whole relationship was founded on a lie, I don't like that. And you can think that way if you want. I think it makes for compelling drama. Because these two have really funny chemistry while James is being fake, and really heartwarming chemistry when James is being real. Yeah, it's sappy, but you know what? I like that James discovered that his connection with Aiden was far more meaningful than anything he had with the fans. This guy invented an entire fake persona for a group of people he didn't even know, thinking that their support would give him the satisfaction he wanted. And while it did give him a dopamine rush, those people didn't really like James for who he was, only who they perceived him to be. But Aiden encouraged him to be his honest, authentic self, and it worked, because James was honest with himself, and with Aiden, he found the connection that he was looking for all his life. And this is what makes that final speech on the mountain really hit for me, because I know that when James told Aiden, "You are everything I ever wanted," he meant that shit. And at the end of the day, I think that James's arc perfectly captures the theme of the season. If you commit to being the best, most authentic version of yourself, then you will find a place with people who love you. The one thing about James that I do think is a missed opportunity is that he and Rhea never had a scene where they actually talked about this. Maybe a scene at the end of the episode where they talk about their time competing on the show together. Rhea could lament everything that went wrong, while James could tell her everything he learned while competing on the show. This would bring the two closer together as they look towards the future, bringing the season full circle. But even without a scene like that, I think that James was absolutely phenomenal this season, and one of the only Disventure Camp characters that I think can compete with the best of Total Drama. And for all of these reasons, I think that James is the best character in Disventure Camp Season 2, and the best character in all of Disventure Camp. For those of you wondering why I'm so overly critical, quote-unquote, of Disventure Camp, I want to make it clear right now that I'm not just blindly hating on new episodes of the series. Yes, sometimes I do overplay my reactions for the sake of comedy. That's just part of being a YouTuber sometimes, but I firmly maintain that all of my Disventure Camp criticism has been valid. And having watched and thoroughly enjoyed DC2, I'm now more confident in that claim than ever. I always knew that Disventure Camp had the potential to make something like this, and all of my critiques over the years were always intended to help them get to this level of writing. I actually went back to watch a few episodes of DC5 right after my binge, thinking that maybe if I was in a good mood, I'd enjoy it more, and no! I watched every available episode of Disventure Camp Season 5, and I don't really care for any of them. They're all very mediocre episodes, and given what Odd Nations has shown me that they can create, I don't feel like we should be settling for mediocrity. ONC is clearly capable of making a tightly written season with a likable cast of characters, and this is proof of that. My plan is for this to be my last video ranking Disventure Camp characters, at least in this format, and if I decide to stick to that plan, then I'm glad that my time ranking these characters can end on such a high note. Jared, Robert, Jorge, and everyone else who made this season possible, please give yourselves a pat on the back. This was excellent. If any of you are curious about the future of DC content on this channel, well, I'm gonna hold off on telling you about that right now, because there is a video that I want to work on that I initially envisioned as my 10K subscriber special, which will go into that in more detail. So keep your eyes peeled for a video like that. But in the meantime, there's still one more thing that I'd like to say before I head off. I'd like to give a...
I don't understand what the problem is. Everyone seemed perfectly happy.
Yeah, everyone except for you.
What's that supposed to mean?
Well, the way I see it, James and Aiden get a happy ending together. Rosa and Lake sort out their problems, and Rhea is rich. But you? Well, come on, Tess. Hunter and Allie and a bottle of pills aren't going to suddenly fix everything wrong with you.
You think I don't know that? I've been living with this my entire life. Some days, I have to fight myself just to get up in the morning. Other days, I feel so overwhelmed that I can scream. Whenever we spend time together, there's always the thought in the back of my head, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm really happy now. But those moments never last. If I could fix this one thing about myself, then I could deal with literally everything else my life throws my way. But there's no way for me to do that.
Of course you can't. But, you know, if you really want to see some changes in your life, I could easily do that for you.
What do you mean?
I have the power to change you into an entirely new person. If you really want me to, I can work my magic and get rid of those intrusive thoughts entirely. It's really not that hard. I just need your verbal permission to do so.
Look, I appreciate you trying to help me, but I don't think I can go through with that. I mean, what if Hunter and Allie...
God, always Hunter and Allie with you, isn't it? If they really cared about you as much as you seem to think they do, wouldn't they want you to be the best version of yourself?
Well...
Besides, this isn't about them for once in your life. This is about you. I am here to help you. I can make you a star girl! You've been so selfless for as long as you've competed on Disventure Camp. Wouldn't you like to prioritize yourself this one time?
It would be nice to feel good about myself. Alright. I'll let you work your magic.
I knew you'd make the right decision. Now, allow me to—
It won't hurt, will it? I'm sorry, I'm still a little shaken up about that monster. And I want to prepare myself.
You are so adorable.
Thank you, but I'm really not.
You are! And when I'm done with you, you're going to see that for yourself. Not the spectators, though. They'll have to wait.
A big thank you to all of my channel members: Novas, Factually False, Sour Guts, Nachos, Shoelace, Commander Cone, MI37000, Neonite, Coco Fondula, Ryu, Critterling, Adrienne, Skohei, Scorpion Stinger, Sheepishly, Lien Drinha Raja, Momiji Enjoyer, Cordy, Fonzo, Forever Tringy, Wurtem, and Fish6446. As always, you guys are the best, and your support means the world to me. Especially right now, given what's been going on with my family. Like, genuinely, thank you all so much. I don't even know how to thank you at this point. You're the best. I'd like to give a double thank you to Sour Guts for providing the voice of Paula, and Blair Projects for providing the voice of Tess. These are both really good friends of mine, and you should totally check out their channels. If you like my content and want to see more, don't forget to comment, like/hype the video, and subscribe to the channel because it does really help out a lot. If you want to support me financially, you can become a channel member or check out my Ko-Fi in the pinned comment below. And with all of that being said, I think I am finally done with this monster of a video. It is 6:30 a.m. in the morning, and I need to go to bed. I'm really proud of this video, but I am glad that it's behind me. Anyway, I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!